So, good morning, everybody. With the new setup now from what they set up over the weekend, I had to get a last second schooling on it this morning, but it looks like we might be in business. So, welcome to K Talk. This is Global Affairs Unfiltered. Jared Stockwell here on the 16th day of February. It's Monday morning, and for those of you on the stream, glad that you are here. Apparently, there will be commercials and whatnot during the program. I guess we're back to the old format. And I'm glad to hear some commercials. I'm glad to hear people trusting in the faith and the devotion of K-Talk listeners to traffic their business, especially this repair thing here in Riverton you just heard about. Well, welcome, everyone. Welcome to this forum I try to present here at K-Talk Radio, Monday and Tuesday with Global Affairs Unfiltered, to just kind of bring things up to date. In a world setting, in the world community, not so much local things. I was watching local news this morning about the latest stuff going on in the legislature, and there are people who are more knowledgeable and more talented than me, K-Talk, to bring you the latest local update. And my focus has usually been world affairs, because what is coming down the pipe as far as the world is a little bit different than its overall dynamic than just what has happened locally. So I want to welcome all of you. We have an incredibly tense picture. I want to start this introduction with the Munich Security Conference, which opened Friday. And as a matter of fact, Chancellor Merz, who was giving the opening speech, very clear that this security conference, and I'm going to get to what Rubio had to say, but is given, in reality, I mean, also, he was very obvious in this desperate effort by the military and industrial complex of the West to somehow pretend that normality is back, that we're going to be okay now, everything is back to normal, that the transatlantic relationship is not as bad as it was last year, Trump is coming to his senses, as was demonstrated by the speech by J.D. Vance, who accused the Europeans of suppressing freedom of speech and freedom of opinion. Remember that? And that really shook up everything. It hasn't been shook up for the last year. Now, with the new approach, which isn't new at all, it's just another cover, Europeans naturally regarded that as an insult, but the behavior of the European Union since absolutely proves the point. J.D. Vance was absolutely correct in what he had to say about the European Union last year. That doesn't mean that what they're doing in the United States, what they're doing with ICE is anything. But the Munich Security Conference is an assembly. It used to be, anyway, as long as, what's his name, Telchik, I think it was the head of the Munich Security Conference. It used to be a conference where strategic experts from around the world would gather and discuss strategy. But ever since Ischinger has taken over the post, and then followed by Christoph Houston, who's here now. And then it was Jens Stoltenberg. I mean, leadership keeps changing because I don't think these guys can buy what they're being paid to say. Anyway, Ischinger is the master of ceremonies again this year. He's really become a complete PR event for the military-industrial complex. So the crisis of the transatlantic system, which is severe, especially the financial one. That's acknowledged that there is a confidence crisis, no trust, no credibility. Nobody in Europe, European Union, NATO is trusting the position of the United States right now. Certainly, uh, Russia does not trust the United States right now because of all the flip-flopping and direction turning that's been going on, and the threats that don't get followed through. Um, so they're trying. This conference is trying somehow to paper over this. So Rubio um, spoke for the United States, and there's a significant delegation from China with Wang Yi, who will speak, uh, Fu Ying, a very important female diplomat from China, will speak. Why is China so heavy in the Munich Security Conference? Yeah, I don't think I have to answer that. They'll bring in the voice of the global South, global majority, and the global majority has long stopped looking at the Munich Security Conference as the navel on the whole planet. And they realize that the two systems of the global West and the North, the global majority, have drifted far. The global majority, representing the vast majority of the population and gross domestic product of this planet, has moved not at light speed, but drastically away from the West. And so they were brought into this conference to try to bring things back to some state of normalcy. Now, there are demonstrations that have been going on outside the Munich Security Conference by people protesting against the spirit of the conference. The population in Germany is also not of the same opinion as that which is being expressed at this conference. Recent polls say that 58% of the population is in favor with Merz to finally shut up and sit down and start very serious confrontations or conversations with Putin. And his party is 64% in favor of Merz to sit down and stop the militarization of Germany and start talking to Putin. But naturally, the conference is going to be setting for what is now on schedule after the New START treaty was not extended. It seems as though there's still some kind of negotiations going on between the United States and Russia with some new treaty replacing the New START. It's very doubtful under the present circumstances where that's going to end up. So in any case, you can expect huge rearmament worldwide. That's why I'm going to this. That one sentence. You can expect huge rearmament, including nuclear rearmament worldwide. And there are signs I saw over the week that the U.S. Air Force Global Strike Command is intending to add additional warheads to the Minutemen ICBM. They want to renuclearize the entire B-52 bomber fleet, which had been denuclearized during the New START treaty. They also want to put in the birds, the multi-reentry vehicle stuff, putting many warheads on the 400 Minutemen free ICBM force. We have 400 in various places, 400 Minutemen free ICBMs can reach anywhere on the planet. They want to renuclearize them. So they want to convert the entire B-52 fleet into a dual-capable long-range strike platform. And all of that will be a continuous disturbance, obviously, to the strategic balance. And it seems, according to an article in the New York Times by David Sanger, that the United States wants to deploy many more nuclear weapons, modernize its entire nuclear fleet, and likely go to some kind of nuclear testing. We're talking about that. We love nuclear testing in the West. And this article in the Times insinuates that the Trump administration wants to abandon the postulate of strategic nuclear parity. So what is also on schedule is the deployment of the U.S. medium-range missiles in Germany this year. which could happen at any moment, actually, to which the Russians have already responded very strongly. Let me repeat, at any moment, medium-range U.S. missiles can be deployed into Germany. Where is Germany going to be deploying them? What's Germany's intention to use them? My voice is coming in and out. It's too loud on the street. Well, I don't know what to do. Sorry. I may end up needing another platform for this. I don't know. But anyway, at any moment, U.S. medium range tomahawks and that kind of stuff could be deployed to Germany. The Russians have already said what they will do about that. Deputy Foreign Minister Grushko said that this will have similar counter deployments by Russia, given the fact that they have all these new weapon systems from the Oreshnik to the Burevestnik and others. One can only speculate what that would be. So if we, our nation, under the direction of President Trump, sends these medium-range missiles to Germany, and there's no way to hide it, what is sitting in or close to, or maybe already in the occupied territories of Eastern Ukraine, missile-wise? Kaliningrad, which is a missile base. Do they have the Oreshnik? How close Kaliningrad is to Germany? I'm skipping a jump. And now there's no New START treaty renewal for at least a year. Putin offered it to Trump several times. Now, obviously, in the midst of all this story, dominating the entire world strategic situation is the unbelievable scope of the Epstein scandal. And what has come out so far is absolutely mind-boggling. Thanks, Paul. It's an absolutely incredible degree of depravity and sordidness, a very large part of the establishment. It is very clear that the system is now surfacing with that, where not only child molestation, sexual manipulation, and misuse of minors, even small children, is coming out. Now, just think for a moment what the mindset must be to do something that was connected with belonging to a club, which would give entrance to participating in all kinds of shady money deals. Basically, who knows what will be unearthed in all of this? The UK, those of you on the stream, and those few of you on the stream, it looks like commercials are getting soon. I guess I could have recorded. This is a new setup. I'll just ask you to be patient. It's very interesting because I wouldn't mind carrying on a conversation with those of you on the stream. Um, um, one of these commercials or whatever it is playing TikTok plays itself. But it looks like we're going back to the old format, which is where the computer is driving everything. every time we, as human beings, get involved with the system, uh, looks like we might be back now. I'm just saying, I'm just telling the people on the street that everything is computerized at TikTok, which is really a good thing. I just have to pay attention when I see the sound bar across here that something else is playing. And this should stop an awful lot of the transmission problems we had because every time a human, things have a way of getting messed up. But anyway, back to what I was talking about before the break, the idea that this Epstein scandal. I don't want to get into more of the program, but I was mentioning the kind of mindset that's involved in being able to do these things because your entrance into the Epstein organization, the Epstein file membership, was participating in all kinds of shady money deals. I mean, you look where Epstein came from, nothing. And in a short while, he's a multi-billionaire. And what he's doing with this money are shady money deals. But entrance into the shady money deal, you kind of have to bend over. The Starmer government is about ready to fall. After Peter Mandelson and also some other members of his cabinet had to resign over the Epstein scandal. But what's really scandalous is when Congressman Thomas Massey, and I kind of want to stand up and hand over my heart and say the Pledge of Allegiance, Thomas Massey, and Ro Khanna were able to look at some of the redacted, unredacted files. In only a few hours, they found the names of 6 very influential people. They didn't reveal the names yet, but they said that proves that in the total 6 million documents, there are many more such names. And it's very clear that the Department of Justice was covering it all up. And I don't know if you've seen some of the interplay that's gone on between investigative committee members and Attorney General Bondi. But someone's got to tell Bondi to step down. There is no acceptable excuse for her behavior in this. It looks like she's trying to be President Trump's lawyer. She's not President Trump's lawyer. She's my lawyer. She's your lawyer. She's the ultimate law enforcement head of the citizens of this nation, not the executive branch of government. While it is the executive branch's responsibility to put her in there, or somebody else for that, she doesn't represent, although she has been. She's not supposed to represent the executive branch. She's supposed to represent us in prosecution or defense against parties who've taken up legal action against the citizens of the United States. So there is this interchange between Massey and Attorney General Bondi, where he accused Bondi of being involved in the cover-up. Wow. All the times I wasn't sitting in the gallery watching this take place. But thanks to our digital networks, we can see replays. But also previous administrations that go back to George Bush Jr. Because the existence of these files was known for many years, so Obama and Biden, in all this time, and back to George W., there was never any criminal investigation of what was known to be enormous wrongdoing already. So even those parts of the establishment who were not involved in criminal activity for sure have a part in the crime because they didn't do anything to stop it. But that's part of the rules of belonging to the Epstein Club. While you may not have been filmed in performing any incident, you still know the stuff's going on. It's like the old omerta of the mafia. Omerta doesn't exist in organized crime anymore. But there was a time when omerta, when you became a made man, swore silence. That's what allowed what Luciano put together with the five families back in World War One period or the 20s, the commission and the oath of omerta. Well, that's kind of what happened with the situation for the Epstein membership as well. Silence, even if you hadn't done anything wrong. Now, while all of this is going on, there are some other crises, of course, which still means Damocles, which is a big war sword right now, is hanging over the entire planet. Namely, there is a big armada amassing in the Persian Gulf region. One aircraft carrier is already there, another one, the USS Gerald Ford, is on the way. And in an early visit, Prime Minister Netanyahu, 2 days ago, or 4 days ago, met with Trump. And they had a 3-hour discussion. And one can only assume, unless President Trump gives us a different direction to follow, that Netanyahu was pressuring him to move against Iran. Now, Iran has already said that they have the right to enrich uranium. And they are definitely not going to give up their ballistic missiles, which would deprive them of any significant defense. And they're not going to give up support for the so-called resistance in the region. So President Trump, in his usual way, said, well, maybe they'll make it. But if they don't, maybe there has to be military action. In any case, this is extremely dangerous. And I can only repeat what I'm saying many times, not just me, not just the major voices, that the narrative of the Western media about what is going on in Iran is completely fraudulent. Bessent, Secretary of the Treasury, admitted in a Senate hearing that the United States was involved in an active color revolution operation by causing a run on the banks in Iran, forcing the Iranian central bank to pump money into the system, which of course led to massive inflation. So the people went into the streets to protest. That's what they were protesting. And at the moment when the Iranian government started to talk with the population, promising to remedy the hardships, which were caused not by the Iranian government, but by outside manipulations, as Bessent was admitting to, then there was this influx of foreign agents committing the violence of which the Iranian government was accused. And you remember a little statement by a former Pompeo, who said next to every protester was an agent of the Mossad in the streets. So the violence of which the Iranian government was accused, Bessent had the nerve to call that economic statecraft, changing the government without military intervention by economic means. Is that any different than by the force of arms? I think the whole situation has reached the point where I think the Epstein scandal is, among other things, simply to divert my attention and your attention from the real danger in the Middle East, the impending war against Iran, which I thought, talking about before, I thought was already underway by. You notice the aircraft carriers there in the Gulf. are just outside because we could lose a lot of steel in that Gulf if the missiles come after those carriers. Are we ready to sacrifice a carrier or two in order to get popular opinion in this country to support war against Iran when Iran is no threat to the United States whatsoever? Nevertheless, the Epstein affair has clearly reached the tip. Too many people know about it. Too many people know of the Justice Department's cover up. And that's who's covering this up. Remember last summer? Yeah, we got the files. They're filed right there on my desk. We're going to release them. Then Bondi didn't release them. Patel didn't act against them. Then all of a sudden they were gone. Where'd those files go? Bob, where's those files? Now there's 6 million of them. And they're not being released until they've been redacted. In other words, erased. So I wasted a good hour of my the other day. I don't know why there's an echo on the stream. Tamara, I'm not sure why there's an echo. I got an idea and I'll have to work on that. Anyway, um, as I was saying, the Epstein affair has clearly reached a tipping point with all of the reaction that's going on, erasing file after file after file with black marks. Just a big old black magic marker, run it line after line. Well, you know the printers can do that. You don't have to do it right in. They just put the file through a printing system and the printer does it. Now, what does that mean? What does that mean when files are ordered by a court, a judge, a Senate or House committee or whatever else, or by action of the president to be released, and you don't release them until after they black them all out? What does that? Who's doing the hiding and what is their hiding? Well, we all know. We've seen the reports of the greatest depravity that I'm not even going to name some of the worst stuff that's been revealed. But it's clear that the moral depravity and the sordidness of the system which tolerates this is the mindset of those who condone what's going on in Gaza and who are playing risky games, not only potentially involving nuclear weapons, but also allowing a bubble to accumulate because of massive speculation, which could blow up the whole Western system and with it much of the world economy, also bringing enormous potential hardships on millions. This is why there are forces out there, as the International Peace Coalition, putting the question of a new security and development architecture absolutely on the table and the follow-up. This is one of the reasons why I pay attention to what the Schiller Institute has. It's one of the few sane voices left. But this isn't obviously isn't over with by any means. The biggest, I think the biggest flashpoint so far in this was Attorney General Bondi's combative House Judiciary Committee the other day on the beginning of last week on the 11th. If you haven't seen this stuff, it's out there. I don't want to say that it's almost entertaining. I, I think she was being egged on. I think the Democrats and some of the Republicans was pushing her buttons so she would respond the way she responded. That is no way for the Attorney General of the United States to act with television cameras. She wants to act like that behind the scenes. So that's what this is. But the bipartisan anger over two failures going in opposite directions. The Department of Justice redacted the names of alleged co-conspirators and powerful associates. Representative Massey said there were 6 names improperly hidden, while simultaneously failing to redact the identities of the survivors, exposing nude images, names of dozens of victims, including minors. And this is emerged that the Department of Justice was supposedly tracking lawmakers. House Speaker Mike Johnson called it inappropriate. Democrats accused Bondi of spying. And then on X, Representative Pramila Jayapal, I think is how you pronounce it, called the whole thing one big Fox cover-up, with Representative Massey's post about viewing the files, drawing enormous engagement in the internet. And the overarching trend is growing bipartisan distrust that there's any semblance of the Department of Justice acting in good faith. Yeah. And then I mentioned earlier, Starmer's European fallout. I mean, they've got as many names over there as we got over here. Epstein's pool of participants wasn't limited to the United States by any means. World leaders all over the place. I mean, did you go to the files and search your name? Ah, I wasn't there. The European fallout. The Prime Minister Starmer's government is in a crisis after these revelations of Peter Mandelson, almost his right-hand man in his cabinet, may have passed sensitive government information to Epstein during the 2008 financial crisis. And then what happened? Mandelson resigned. Did he resign because he's innocent? Did he resign in the hopes that the investigation would stop with his resignation? No. Metropolitan Police raided Mandelson's home on February 6th and opened a formal criminal investigation of what they found. And then Starmer's chief of staff and communications director both resigned. And then the Scottish Labour's leader called for Starmer to step down. And then on X, Representative Rokana widely shared the quote captured the contrast that said, "This is bringing down the British government. They bring down the monarchy. What are we doing here in the United States?" Wow. What a time to be alive. And the thing that these other countries are holding their elites more accountable than we are is becoming a very significant theme on X and in the news. Here, it's almost like we're turning a blind eye to this. Now, the newest, most politically charged theme is the spotlight on sending the Trump administration officials that are named in the files, particularly Commerce Secretary Epstein, whose 2012 email planning a trip to Epstein's Island contradicted his claims of having cutting off all ties of Epstein back 6 years earlier, 2006. The New York Times reported that London's interactions with Epstein were far more expensive than previously disclosed. But then, I will mute voice and for those few of you who are on the street. Isn't this just lovely? Isn't this just, oh, as I was saying a few minutes ago, what a time to be alive, what a time to see this kind of stuff take place. And there's a line being drawn down the middle of the or in both houses, because you're either you're either in favor of the redactions going on, and you just want to sweep it all under the carpet and hope that the American memory continues as it normally does, or you get into a total fluster of all of this and just ready to start some campaign to dethrone these people. But don't lose sight of what I think is going on here. This is a cover-up. This is a distraction, and that I think the attack on Iran will begin before you know it. They think it'll only take 2 weeks, but by the end of 2 weeks, Israel, of course, will be gone. Most of the U.S.-based um, outposts throughout the Middle East will be gone because Iran has thousands of missiles, many of which are hypersonic. So I still think that may be what's really going to happen. Now, I mentioned Senator Chris Coons, who confronted Levy directly. 3 members of Congress immediately called for his resignation. Secretary of the Navy John Faber, Deputy Attorney General Feinberg were also flagged. Meanwhile, Deputy Attorney General Todd Blanche declared new prosecutions unlikely, fueling cynicism on X out there. Accountability is going to stop at the water's edge. A Deputy Attorney General said new prosecution in the Epstein case is unlikely. Now, Catherine Rumler, who served as White House counsel to President Obama from 2011 to 2014, was once shortlisted for Attorney General. She resigned on February 13th as chief legal officer of Goldman Sachs after the newly released Epstein files released over 100 email exchanges and dozens of in-person meetings with the convicted sex offender between 2014 and 2000. And the correspondence showed Remler calling Epstein Uncle Jeffrey and accepting luxury gifts, including Hermes bags and a fur coat, while also providing him with legal advice on managing media coverage of his alleged abuses. All of this after his 2008 sex crime conviction. She was even listed as a backup executor of Epstein's 2019 will, and his cell phone records show he told her the night of his final arrest. So much of the initial coverage framed her primarily as a Goldman Sachs executive, underplaying her senior White House role under Trump or under Obama, and the broader questions the case raises about the circles of access and impunity the Epstein files continue to release. You can't make this up, as they say. This is just incredible. And she was almost Attorney General. Then there's Sultan Ahmed Ben Sulayem, the chairman and CEO of the Dubai-based logistics giant BP World, identified by Representative Massey as the recipient of the 2009 Epstein email that said, "Where are you? Are you okay? I love the torture video." Holy. The message whose full context hasn't been established yet. What torture? Who was being tortured? Did he mean torture or did he mean something else? We don't know. But the Department of Justice redacted his name on other files after other lawmakers gained access to unredacted files. Both Massey and Ro Khanna named him publicly. So the files also show Sulayem and Epstein exchanging messages about sexual experiences and corresponding about Epstein's private island, all well after Epstein's 2008 conviction. Then Sirleaf was removed as the DP World Chairman and CEO effective immediately, making him one of the highest profile executives globally to lose his position so far because of the Epstein revelations. Then Canadian and UK financial groups paused future ventures with DP World in the aftermath, and Sirleaf has not been accused so far of any criminal wrongdoing. So while all that's going on, I wanted to mention a couple of comments of Rubio at the Munich Security Conference. He gave an address. He delivered what's been called a culturally address to the Munich Security Conference on Saturday. That while posing as the defense of the Western civilization, he was calling for the continued domination of the dying, decaying system of European colonialism. He said, quote, that it was the European continent that produced the genius of Mozart and Beethoven, of Dante and Shakespeare, Michelangelo and Da Vinci, of the Beatles and the Rolling Stones. You know, I was a teenager when the Beatles and Rolling Stones came on the scene, and I loved their music, but to compare the Beatles to, he said, and this is the place where the vaulted ceilings of the Sistine Chapel and the towering spires of the great cathedral in Rome, they testify not just to the greatness of our past, or to a faith of God that inspired him. Then he complained of the deindustrialization of the transatlantic economies without once mentioning the cancer of the financial speculation, which is only growing larger under the reign of Donald Trump. I just thought it was kind of interesting, some of the comments he was making. He said it was powerless to constrain the nuclear program and radical Shiite clerics in Iran that required 14 bombs dropped with precision from American B-2 bombers. It was unable to address the threat to our security from a narco-terrorist dictator in Venezuela. Instead, it took American special forces to bring this fugitive to justice. Wow, wow. And then came this defense of 500 years of colonialism. Now, he's your Secretary of State. He's my Secretary of State. He was saying this stuff Saturday, 2 days ago. He said this: for 5 centuries before the end of the Second World War, the West had been expanding. Its missionaries, its pilgrims, its soldiers, its explorers, pouring out from the shores across oceans, settle new continents, build vast empires extending out across the globe. He didn't mention the slave traders. He didn't mention the opium trade. He didn't mention the vast looting of and other crimes of the imperialists against countries unable to defend themselves. But he did say this. But in 1945, for the first time since the age of Columbus, it was contracting. Europe was in ruins. Half of it lived behind an iron curtain, and the rest looked like it would soon fall. The great Western empires had entered into terminal decline, accelerated by the communist revolutions and by anti-colonial uprisings that would transform the world and create the red hammer and sickle across vast swaths of the map in the years to come. But the U.S. once stands in alliance, ready to defend our people, to safeguard our interests, and preserve the freedom of action that allows us to shape our own destiny. can't read anymore. But he's defending colonialism, 500 years of colonialism, 500 years of stealing. You know, just like this new boat, this new ship full of oil that they were tracking from Venezuela. Now they caught it somewhere in Europe, and they called it interdiction. It's piracy, is what it is. Interdiction. We interdicted another ship loaded with oil. I don't know if it was loaded with oil or not, but it's still ocean. They're out in international waters, and we grabbed them. That's called piracy. Anyway, it continues to entertain me on uh, what what is being revealed. What is being revealed here, and in the sense of what the Epstein files reveal of a deeper indication of what flows through the arteries and the veins of the people in the highest positions of power. Is it blood or is it something else? I mean, it seems that as if everyone who is reading and discussing the Epstein files, most of which are emails exchanged between Jeffrey Epstein and the great and powerful Oz, is assuming the worst from them, that Epstein himself and his co-conspirators engaged in sex trafficking, indulged in the worst abuse of minors, including ritual sacrifice, even cannibalism. And while there is evidence of such dark practices in these elite circles, the hard evidence for such in the Epstein files isn't just email. And when considering whether or not to assume the worst, consideration should be given to the context in which these revelations are occurring. In other words, Trump's second term and the major damage it can do to his intention of enacting the electoral mandate he was given by the American people. Is that part of what this is all about? Because in the meantime, Trump is also under tremendous pressure to regime change Iran, an issue he's made clear he doesn't want to see if the result ends up in some protracted and bloody conflict, for which the deep state, including Israel, seems determined to make happen. So is it by design or just bad luck that Epstein and the fear and loathing that is generated in the population just happened to erupt at this time? I know I'm kind of repeating that idea over and over and over. So some of the things that are most ghastly, you're most troubled by, you're most bothered by, are sins of the flesh. And the thing that makes the sins of the flesh even worse is when it's done by the most powerful, the most innocent, the most defenseless. And so the public fixation on the Epstein files has settled, predictably, of course, on the most lurid elements of the story. That's completely understandable. That's how our brains work. Sexual exploitation, especially of the young, is among the most corrosive of crimes, and the scale of Epstein's abuse, as well as the apparent indifference to powerful institutions, is where this moral outrage is coming from. But to focus exclusively on the sexual scandal is to miss the deeper, more unsettling lesson this affair is trying to tell us. What the Epstein files expose, above all, is the social and moral estrangement of the American elites from the people that they claim to govern. Epstein was not merely a predator who gained access to power. He was he was a center point, one of many center points, but a center point in a closed world of wealth, influence, and immunity. And the scandals thought the powerful people behaved badly in private, because history is full of that. But they did so with a confidence rooted in the belief that somehow, based on their wealth and their power, they were insulated from the consequences of their most disgusting behavior. And they moved through a transnational culture that had largely severed itself from ordinary moral constraints, legal accountability, civic obligation. And the culture did not merely tolerate Epstein, the people that he ran with essentially normalized it. So here's an individual whose source of income were rarely scrutinized, and he functioned as a social broker among financiers, politicians, academics, royalty, many of whom publicly advocated policies, moral uplift and social justice, responsibility, and save the kids, yet in privately inherited or inhabited a world defined by indulgence, entitlement, and contempt. And while we talk about these things in our families and in our social circles, our workplace, our church groups, whatever else, I think something just as horrible. Uh-oh. Are we going to K-Talk? What's playing? I think this is, I'll see you all tomorrow. I think I think what this is doing is closing me out commercially for the news. I should have been anticipating because of the system. So those on the stream, thanks for listening today. I'll try to do a little bit better communication.